The sound of shattering glass echoed through the AP Economics classroom like a gunshot. $2,000 worth of laptop components scattered across the polished floor. Circuit boards and screen fragments creating a constellation of destruction. Preston Whitmore III stood over the wreckage, his face flushed crimson from a cocktail of cocaine and rage, designer shoes crunching on the remains of what had been the substitute teacher's computer just seconds before. "You think you're somebody?" His voice cracked with fury, spittle flying as he towered over the petite woman behind the desk. "You think you can give me an F? Do you have any idea who I am? I'll turn you into a corpse nobody will recognize." 28 students pressed themselves against their seats, some fumbling for phones before thinking better of it. Everyone knew Preston Whitmore III, son of Connecticut's most powerful billionaire. Untouchable. Until today. Madison Harper remained perfectly still. Not a tremor in her hands, not a tear in her eye. She simply watched Preston with an expression that seemed almost anticipatory. Her fingers moved to adjust the butterfly brooch on her blazer, a gesture so casual it seemed absurd given the circumstances. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," she whispered, her voice carrying a chill that cut through Preston's rage. "And you don't even know why." Preston's laugh was sharp and ugly, completely unaware that the gears of his destruction had already begun turning, that the machine designed to dismantle his entire world had just been activated. If this story makes you think about the abuse of power in our schools, or if you've ever witnessed someone standing up to a bully, please hit that like button. Your support helps these important stories reach more people. And drop a comment below sharing your thoughts. Every perspective matters in conversations about justice and accountability. The aftermath of Preston's explosion spread through Blackstone Elite Academy like wildfire. Within an hour, his Instagram story blazed across every phone screen in school. Madison Harper's personal cell number displayed in bold text with the caption, "Call this pathetic teacher and tell her what happens to nobodies who cross a Whitmore." Madison's phone erupted with notifications, hundreds of text messages flooding in, each more vile than the last. Death threats, graphic descriptions of violence, promises to destroy her career and her life. But Madison didn't panic. She didn't cry. She methodically screenshotted every single message, her fingers flying across the screen with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Each screenshot was immediately forwarded to an encrypted number that appeared as only asterisks in her contact list. Her typing speed, the way she organized the evidence into categorized folders, these weren't the actions of a frightened teacher. These were the practiced movements of a professional. 3 weeks earlier, Madison Harper had sat in a nondescript office building in downtown Hartford, facing a mahogany table occupied by 3 individuals whose combined net worth exceeded the GDP of several small nations. The man at the center, silver-haired with eyes like a hawk, had slid a folder across the table. "Miss Harper," he'd said, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older secrets, "we need someone with your very particular skill set. Someone who can determine if Preston Whitmore III deserves to inherit $2.3 billion. The folder had contained everything: psychological evaluations showing escalating violent tendencies, covered-up incidents at 3 previous schools, and a trust fund with 1 critical clause. The moral turpitude provision, written by Preston's grandfather, a man who'd built his fortune from nothing and feared his descendants would squander it on excess and cruelty. "We don't need you to teach economics," the silver-haired man had continued. "We need you to test him, to see what Preston becomes when he thinks he's facing someone powerless." Madison had accepted the assignment without hesitation. After all, She wasn't really Madison Harper, substitute teacher. She was Senior Special Agent Madison Harper, Financial Crimes Division, on loan to one of the most powerful corporate boards in America. Her mission: stress test the heir apparent and determine if he possessed even a shred of the moral fiber that had built the Whitmore empire. Back in the present, Preston's escalation continued with predictable precision. By day 3, he'd hired a private investigator to dig into Madison's background. The PI, a greasy man named Kovac, who specialized in dirt, had trailed her to a modest apartment complex on the outskirts of town. He'd photographed her 10-year-old Toyota, documented her shopping at discount grocery stores, and concluded she was exactly what she appeared: a struggling teacher barely making ends meet. What Kovac failed to notice was how Madison spotted his surveillance van within minutes, how she'd actually waved at the camera he thought was hidden, or how her modest apartment was one of 6 FBI safe houses in the state. Madison's phone buzzed with a secure message. She glanced at it during her lunch break, recognizing the encryption signature immediately. The message contained a single video file: surveillance footage from the Whitmore Holdings boardroom. 12 figures sat around a massive table, all watching a live feed. The feed showed Preston in his family's mansion, cutting lines of cocaine with a platinum credit card, while bragging to his friends about his plans for the pathetic substitute. "She has no idea what's coming," Preston's voice echoed through the boardroom speakers. "By next week, she'll be begging to leave the state. Maybe I'll even have some real fun with her first." One of the board members, an elderly woman with sharp features, turned to the man beside her. "Harold," she said quietly, "your nephew is even worse than we feared." Harold Whitmore, Preston's uncle and the company's vice chairman, nodded grimly. "Keep recording everything, Agent Harper," he typed into his secure phone. "The family needs indisputable proof before we can act." The 4th week brought Preston's most vicious attack yet. Using sophisticated deepfake technology that money could easily buy on the dark web, he created explicit images of Madison and distributed them through anonymous channels. The images spread through the school's underground social networks like a virus, accompanied by degrading comments about what the uptight teacher really wanted. Students whispered in hallways, some looking at Madison with disgust, others with a predatory interest that made her skin crawl. Madison discovered the images during her morning coffee, tipped off by an encrypted alert on her phone. She studied them clinically, noting the technical markers that would make prosecution easier. Metadata traces, digital fingerprints that Preston's expensive but careless contractor had failed to scrub. She made one phone call, speaking only 4 words. "Execute Breach Protocol 7. Within 10 minutes, every link was dead. Every image scrubbed from the internet. The FBI's Cybercrimes Division had tools that made Preston's dark web connections look like children's toys. More importantly, they now had his digital fingerprints all over a federal crime. At this point in her investigation, Madison had started to build a comprehensive profile of Preston Whitmore III. Beneath the cocaine-fueled bravado and designer clothes was something far more dangerous than a spoiled rich kid. Preston showed all the markers of antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features, a complete lack of empathy combined with an insatiable need for dominance. His previous schools had hushed up incidents ranging from animal cruelty to sexual assault, all buried under massive donations and non-disclosure agreements. He wasn't just a bully. He was a predator in training, and his inheritance would give him the power to destroy lives on an industrial scale. This realization had prompted Madison to enhance her security protocols. She'd switched from basic surveillance to active protection, knowing that Preston's behavior would escalate toward physical violence. It was as predictable as a mathematical equation. Narcissistic injury plus unlimited resources plus cocaine-induced paranoia equals dangerous action. She just had to make sure she controlled the variables. Madison pulled out her specially encrypted phone, a device that looked like a standard smartphone but contained military-grade security features. The phone could record with legal authentication timestamps, store data with blockchain verification, and connect directly to federal law enforcement databases. Every threat, every harassment, every piece of evidence was captured in a format that would stand up in any court in the country. This wasn't consumer technology. This was the same system used by undercover agents in the most dangerous operations. Halloween night arrived with an appropriately ominous atmosphere. Fog rolled across Blackstone Academy's manicured grounds as Madison worked late in her classroom, grading papers with deliberate visibility. She'd parked in the most isolated section of the faculty lot, her Toyota sitting alone under a broken streetlight. To any observer, she looked like the perfect victim, isolated, vulnerable, unaware. In reality, 6 FBI surveillance cameras covered every angle, and a rapid response team waited just 3 blocks away. Preston had spent the evening getting progressively higher, mixing cocaine with premium vodka in his family's mansion, while his parents attended another charity gala. By 10 p.m., he'd made the decision that would seal his fate. 3 phone calls to connections in Hartford's seedier districts had procured the muscle he needed. Experienced men who specialized in sending messages that hospitals would document, but victims rarely reported to police. They arrived at Blackstone Academy at 11:30 p.m., parking their van in the shadows beyond the security cameras. What they didn't know was that Madison had tagged their vehicle the moment it entered the school grounds, and FBI tactical units were already moving into position. The confrontation in the parking lot unfolded with cinematic precision. Madison emerged from the building at 11:45 p.m., textbooks clutched to her chest, playing the part of the overworked teacher perfectly. The 3 men materialized from the shadows, one carrying a telescoping baton, another flicking open a butterfly knife, the third cracking his knuckles with practiced menace. They formed a triangle around her, cutting off escape routes with professional efficiency. "Preston sends his regards," the lead thug growled, baton extending with a metallic whisper. "Says you need a lesson in respect." Madison's transformation was subtle but complete. Her posture shifted, weight transferring to the balls of her feet. The textbooks dropped, but her hand had already found the panic button on her phone. "You have 30 seconds to leave before SWAT arrives," she said calmly. "This is your only warning." The men laughed, a sound that died quickly as sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each second. Madison didn't fight. She didn't need to. She simply evaded, using minimal movement to stay out of reach, her training in defensive tactics evident in every step. The lead attacker swung his baton in frustration, missing by inches as Madison flowed around the attack like water. 28 seconds after she'd hit the alert, 6 black SUVs screeched into the parking lot, disgorging FBI tactical teams in full gear. The 3 attackers dropped their weapons instantly, hands shooting skyward as laser sights painted red dots on their chests. As the attackers were cuffed and loaded into vehicles, Preston watched everything from his car parked on a hill overlooking the school. His hands shook uncontrollably, whether from rage or cocaine or the first taste of real fear. He couldn't tell. He'd expected to see Madison brutalized, terrified, broken. Instead, he'd witnessed her calmly orchestrating the arrest of 3 career criminals while barely breaking a sweat. For the first time in his 18 years of consequence-free existence, Preston Whitmore III began to understand that he might have made a terrible miscalculation. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Madison entered her classroom at 7:15 a.m., same as always, wearing the same style of conservative blazer, the same butterfly brooch positioned precisely on her lapel. She arranged her new laptop, a replacement that had appeared overnight, and began writing the day's lesson on the whiteboard. Students filtered in slowly, many glancing at her with a mixture of awe and confusion. The rumors from the previous night had spread like wildfire. The substitute teacher had faced down 3 armed men without flinching. FBI had swarmed the school, and somehow it all connected to Preston Whitmore III. Preston arrived 20 minutes late, and the entire class could smell the mixture of alcohol and stimulants seeping from his pores. His usually perfect hair hung disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled and stained. He slouched into his seat, eyes bloodshot and movements erratic. Madison continued her lesson on market economics without acknowledging his arrival, though she noted the telltale bulge in his jacket that suggested he'd come armed with more than just attitude. The lesson proceeded with electric tension. Every student could feel the storm building, the inevitable collision between Preston's deteriorating control and Madison's unnatural calm. She discussed supply and demand curves while Preston's breathing grew heavier, his fingers drumming against his desk in an accelerating rhythm that matched his racing heartbeat. At 11:23 a.m., the breaking point arrived. Preston exploded from his seat, sending his desk crashing sideways. From inside his jacket, he pulled a Callaway golf club, a 9-iron that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. "I'm going to kill you right now!" His voice cracked with hysteria. "Nobody can stop me! My father owns this state!" 28 students scrambled backward, some diving under desks, others frozen in terror. Madison didn't move. She simply touched her butterfly brooch and spoke with crystalline clarity. "You're being live-streamed to 12 members of the Whitmore Holdings Board of Directors." She gestured to the nearly invisible camera embedded in her brooch. "Including your great-uncle Harold, who's been particularly interested in your behavior. Oh, and Judge Morrison is watching too. You know, the one who oversees your grandfather's estate." Preston's face drained of color so quickly it looked like special effects. The golf club trembled in his grip as his cocaine-addled brain tried to process this information. On the smartboard behind Madison, a video feed suddenly appeared. 12 faces in a corporate boardroom, all watching with expressions of disgust and disappointment. Harold Whitmore leaned forward, his voice emerging from the classroom speakers. "Preston, put the weapon down. You're finished." The golf club clattered to the floor as Preston's legs gave out. He collapsed into a heap, alternating between sobbing and screaming threats that became increasingly incoherent. Madison reached into her blazer and withdrew a leather case. The badge inside caught the light. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Financial Crimes Division. "My name is Special Agent Madison Harper," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd testified in dozens of federal cases. "I was contracted by the Whitmore Holdings Board to conduct a character assessment of their potential heir. Preston Whitmore III, you have catastrophically failed." Through the speakers, Judge Morrison's voice cut through Preston's wailing. "I'm reading from the last will and testament of Cornelius Whitmore," he intoned. "Article 7, Section 4, the Moral Turpitude Clause. Any heir who commits acts of violence, harassment, or brings disgrace upon the family name shall forfeit all claims to the estate. Based on the evidence presented, death threats, conspiracy to commit assault, possession with intent to distribute narcotics, and attempted murder with a deadly weapon, I hereby execute this clause. Preston Whitmore III is disinherited, effective immediately." The boardroom feed switched to another familiar face. Richard Whitmore, Preston's father, calling from what appeared to be a private jet. His expression showed no sympathy, only cold disappointment. "You had everything," Richard said quietly. "The best schools, unlimited opportunities, a fortune waiting for you. All you had to do was be a decent human being. You couldn't even manage that." Preston screamed for his father, begging for another chance, promising to change. Richard's feed cut off without another word. On Madison's laptop screen, specialized legal software displayed the real-time transfer of assets. The program, a professional-grade platform used by major law firms, showed every account, every property, every stock option being systematically removed from Preston's name. The artificial intelligence built into the system had been tracking his financial crimes for weeks, automatically compiling evidence into court-ready documents. $2.3 billion in assets flowed away from Preston's control with digital precision, redirected to the charitable foundation his grandfather had established for this exact contingency. Security officers entered the classroom, followed by local police who'd been waiting outside. They approached Preston carefully, professionally, treating him like the dangerous criminal he'd revealed himself to be. As they cuffed him, Preston's eyes found Madison one last time. "This isn't over," he spat through tears and snot. "I'll get out. I'll find you. You'll serve 3 to 5 years for attempted assault with a deadly weapon," Madison interrupted calmly. "More if the federal charges stick. Your trust fund is gone. Your family has disowned you. Your future consists of a prison cell and a lifetime of knowing you destroyed yourself because you couldn't control your temper for 30 seconds. She paused, then added with surgical precision, "Your grandfather would be ashamed." The next hours passed in a blur of statements, evidence collection, and media containment. By 3 p.m., word had leaked despite the board's best efforts. Local news vans gathered outside Blackstone Academy like vultures, drawn to the spectacular fall of Connecticut's most privileged son. Madison gave no interviews, referring all questions to the FBI's Public Relations Department. Her job was complete. That evening, in a secure conference room at the Federal Building, Madison submitted her final report to the Whitmore board via encrypted video link. The 12 men and women who controlled one of America's largest fortunes listened as she detailed Preston's psychological profile, his escalating violence, and the clear danger he would have posed with access to billions in resources. "Your intervention saved lives," she concluded. "Preston Whitmore III is a predator who would have used his inheritance to destroy anyone who challenged him. The moral turpitude clause worked exactly as intended." Harold Whitmore spoke for the board. "Agent Harper, your work has been exemplary. The $2.3 billion will be distributed according to Cornelius's wishes. Educational scholarships for underprivileged students, addiction treatment centers, and victims advocacy programs. Preston's victims will receive compensation for their suffering. Justice has been served." The investigation expanded rapidly. Principal Morrison, who'd accepted over $300,000 in donations to overlook Preston's behavior, submitted his resignation before he could be fired. 5 teachers faced federal charges for failing to report witnessed assaults. The FBI's Education Corruption Task Force uncovered a network of bribery and grade manipulation that reached into the Ivy League admissions offices. 12 wealthy parents found themselves in handcuffs, their attempts to buy their children's success finally meeting consequences. Preston's trial became a sensation, though he looked nothing like the arrogant boy who'd terrorized Blackstone Academy. Withdrawal from cocaine combined with the reality of his situation had left him gaunt and hollow-eyed. He sat through testimony from 17 victims, students he'd tormented, teachers he'd threatened, staff he'd assaulted. Each story painted a picture of escalating violence enabled by wealth and institutional cowardice. When the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, Preston showed no emotion. The boy who'd screamed about owning the state couldn't even own his own actions. 3 weeks after Preston's sentencing, Madison Harper sat in her real office at the federal building, case files spread across her desk. The Whitmore investigation had closed successfully, but her work was never done. An encrypted email appeared on her screen, sender unknown, but verification codes confirming it came from the highest levels of the Justice Department. Impressive work. We have another assignment. Attached was a dossier that made her stomach turn. Photos showed a 17-year-old girl, daughter of a prominent senator, pouring acid across a teacher's car while laughing. Additional images documented a pattern of escalating violence. A teaching assistant hospitalized with mysterious injuries. A professor's house vandalized with death threats. A fellow student pushed down a flight of stairs. The girl's father had used his influence to bury every incident, but someone in the department had been building a case. Madison smiled, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion. This was her 8th deep cover assignment in 12 months. Each time, she'd posed as someone vulnerable. A substitute teacher, a teaching assistant, a new staff member, to draw out the predators hiding behind privilege. Each time, she'd endured harassment, threats, and violence to build airtight cases against untouchable criminals. The work was necessary, but it was eating away at her soul. She typed her response carefully. "I'll need hazard pay. These kids are becoming more dangerous with each case." The reply came instantly. "Danger pay approved. There's something else you should know about this one. She's killed before. Officially ruled an accident, but we have questions. Are you still interested?" Madison stared at the screen for a long moment, thinking about all the victims who never got justice, all the predators who bought their way out of consequences, all the institutions that chose money over morality. Then she typed 2 words. "Send details." As she began reviewing the new case file, one thought echoed in her mind. A truth that Preston Whitmore III had learned too late, a lesson written in the ruins of every privileged predator she'd exposed. Money could purchase many things in this world. The best lawyers to twist the law, political influence to rewrite the rules, temporary freedom through bail and appeals, even the silence of witnesses whose poverty made them vulnerable to both bribes and threats. But for all its power, money could never purchase the one thing that mattered most: character. It couldn't buy genuine respect, earned through actions rather than inheritance. It couldn't purchase integrity, built through thousands of small choices to do right when wrong was easier. And when the mask finally slipped, when true nature stood exposed in the harsh light of justice, all the wealth in the world became worthless paper in the face of who you really were.